Once the Israelites were not just tolerated, but honored guests in Egypt, welcomed with open arms because Joseph, through divine wisdom, had saved the entire nation from a devastating famine. Pharaoh, in his gratitude, gave them the best land in the region, the fertile lands of Goshen, and there they prospered and flourished in Goshen, building homes and establishing their community. For generations, decades melted into centuries, they lived in relative peace, their numbers growing exponentially, filling the land. But time, as it always does, marched relentlessly forward, and a new pharaoh rose to power. One who knew nothing of Joseph, nothing of the past alliance, and saw them not as honored guests, but as a potential threat to his throne and the stability of Egypt. Fear, like a creeping vine, took root in his heart, and cruelty, like a poisonous fruit, soon followed. The Israelites, once free and respected, were forced into harsh, back-breaking slavery, their lives now dictated by the whims of a paranoid ruler, building magnificent cities and monuments for Pharaoh, brick by brick under the scorching sun, with relentless and unforgiving labor. Their days became an unending cycle filled with pain, their nights offering little respite, only exhaustion and the dread of the coming dawn. Freedom, once a tangible reality, faded into a distant, almost mythical memory, a story whispered among the elders. Pharaoh's cruelty deepened with each passing day, his heart hardening against the suffering of his slaves, and in a decree of unimaginable horror, every newborn Hebrew boy was ordered to be drowned in the life-giving yet now deadly waters of the Nile. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated terror that gripped the hearts of every Israelite family, the mothers desperately silencing their babies' cries, the fathers standing by, utterly helpless to protect their sons from a cruel and senseless death. This was not just mere slavery or oppression, it was a calculated and systematic attempt to erase a people, to extinguish their lineage and their very identity. Their cries, a collective wail of despair and anguish, rose to heaven, a desperate plea for deliverance from their unbearable suffering. The Israelites slowly lost their dignity, stripped bare by the relentless cruelty of their oppressors, hope for a better future, and even their precious children, snatched away by the cold hand of Pharaoh's decree. The kindness and generosity of the past were completely gone, replaced by the sharp crack of the whip and the brutal gaze of the Egyptian taskmasters. They were no longer treated as honored guests but as mere property, possessions to be used and discarded at will. Their suffering was far more than just physical. It was a soul-crushing weight that threatened to break their spirit and extinguish their faith. The pain was relentless, a constant companion, and the oppression was systematic, designed to break them down completely. Their story, once a tale of prosperity and peace, tragically became one of survival against seemingly impossible odds, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The very land that once offered them safety and refuge had now become their prison, a gilded cage of suffering and despair. Their unique identity as a people, their traditions, their faith, their very heritage was under a relentless and brutal attack. Yet, even in the darkest depths of their despair, their cries would not go unheard, their suffering would not be ignored by the heavens. The nightmare seemed endless, an eternity of suffering, but even in the darkest night, the first glimmer of dawn, the promise of change, was on the horizon. For centuries, the weight of time bore down upon the Israelites. Generations came and went, each marked by hardship and servitude. The Israelites' prayers seemed to vanish into silence, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the heavens. Their cries echoed unanswered in the desolate landscape of their captivity. Generation after generation they suffered and cried out, their voices rising in a chorus of anguish against the relentless oppression. The pain was a constant companion, a shadow that stretched across their lives. Their prayers weren't polished, they weren't eloquent speeches crafted for royal ears. They were desperate groans from broken hearts, raw expressions of pain and longing, whispered in the darkness. Each tear was a testament to their unwavering faith, but God heard. He was not deaf to their suffering, nor blind to their plight. He heard not just the sound, the mere vibrations in the air, but the pain behind it, the crushing weight of despair that threatened to consume them. God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a sacred bond forged in the fires of faith, a promise that could not be forgotten, an eternal commitment etched in the very fabric of creation. He saw their suffering, the relentless burden they carried on their weary shoulders, their bent backs, their scarred hands, the physical testament to their unending toil. God was not distant. He wasn't an aloof observer, detached from their earthly struggles. He was intimately aware of their pain, feeling their anguish as if it were his own. The Bible says God was concerned. His heart ached with compassion for his people. He knew, he cared, and he was ready to act, to unleash his power and deliver them from bondage. Even when silence seems endless, when hope dwindles and darkness prevails, God is listening, ever attentive to the cries of his children. He connects the pain of the present, the immediate and overwhelming reality of their suffering, with the promise of the past, the unwavering assurance of his covenant. God's concern is not passive. It's not a mere acknowledgement of their suffering. It's the beginning of change, the first stirring of a divine intervention. He saw the hopelessness, the fear, the exhaustion that weighed heavily on their souls. He remembered his promise, the solemn vow he had made to their ancestors, and prepared to intervene, to shatter the chains of oppression and set his people free. The Israelites' cries were not ignored. They were not lost in the vastness of the universe. They moved the heart of God, stirring his compassion and igniting his righteous anger against their oppressors. When God is concerned, when he turns his attention towards the plight of his people, deliverance is on the horizon, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Their suffering would not be the end of their story, but rather the prelude to a glorious new chapter. God's faithfulness was about to be revealed, his power unleashed in a display of divine intervention. Hope was stirring in the darkness, a fragile flame flickering against the wind, promising a dawn of freedom and redemption. In the depths of despair, when hope seemed lost and the weight of oppression was crushing, God spoke through Moses, his chosen messenger. He delivered not just one but 4 powerful promises, each a beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness. These promises were not mere words. They were a divine declaration of intent. First, I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. This wasn't just about easing their burden. It was about complete liberation from the oppressive system that had defined their lives for generations. Rescue was coming, a hand reaching down from the heavens to lift them from their misery. Second, I will free you from being slaves. This promise went beyond physical freedom. It spoke to the very core of their being. Their identity would change. They would no longer be defined by their servitude but by their newfound freedom. Third, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and mighty acts. This was a promise of divine intervention, a demonstration of God's power on their behalf. God himself would pay the price for their freedom, a price beyond measure, signifying the immense value he placed on them. Fourth, I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. This was the ultimate promise, the promise of belonging, of being part of something greater than themselves. They would belong to him, embraced by his love, and protected by his power. These weren't empty words, they were a lifeline thrown into the abyss of their suffering. God promised not just escape, a fleeting moment of liberation, but transformation, a complete metamorphosis from slave to free. He would break their chains, shattering the bonds that held them captive, restore their dignity, giving them back the pride that had been stolen from them, and claim them as his own, sealing their belonging with a divine decree. Each promise addressed a deeper need, a longing within the human heart. Rescue, release, a chance to start anew, redemption and belonging, a place to call home. God's plan was total, a comprehensive solution to their plight. Physical, emotional, and spiritual deliverance, healing every wound and restoring every broken piece. The Israelites were not forgotten. They were held in the palm of his hand. They were chosen for a new beginning, a dawn breaking after a long, dark night. These promises would become the foundation of their hope, the cornerstone upon which they would rebuild their lives. God was not sending help from afar. He wasn't a distant observer. He was stepping into their story, becoming intimately involved in their liberation. The rescue would be dramatic, a spectacle of divine power, undeniable and complete, leaving no doubt as to the source of their freedom. The God of the covenant was about to act, unleashing his power in ways they could scarcely imagine. Everything was about to change, ushering in a new era of freedom, hope, and belonging. I will bring you out. God's first promise was intervention. The Israelites were trapped, powerless to save themselves. God didn't offer advice from a distance. He entered their crisis. Their rescue would be his work alone. The yoke of Egypt was heavy, constant, and crushing. God saw the specific burden and promised to lift it. Through the 10 plagues he dismantled Egypt's power. Each plague struck at the heart of Egypt's gods, proving the God of Israel was supreme. The final act, Passover. The angel of death passed over the marked homes and the Israelites walked out of Egypt as a multitude. God opened the door of their prison and led them out. The promise was kept, dramatically and completely. God is a rescuer who does what he says. Their story was no longer one of defeat, but of deliverance. The impossible became reality. God's intervention changed everything. The Israelites' journey to freedom had begun. The first promise was fulfilled in full view of the world. God's power was undeniable. The second promise, I will free you from being slaves. It's one thing to leave slavery, it's another to leave the mindset behind. God's plan was not just relocation, but transformation. He broke the chains on their wrists and in their minds. For generations, slave was their identity. God declared them free, no longer defined by Pharaoh or their past. Freedom meant learning to trust, to live without fear. The wilderness became a classroom for freedom. God was patient, teaching them to walk as his people. Their value was no longer in what they produced, but in who they belonged to. Freedom was a new status, a new way of seeing themselves. God's promise was not just escape, but a new identity. He leads us step by step into true freedom. The journey from slave to free is a process, but God is faithful. The third promise, I will redeem you. In ancient Israel, a kinsman redeemer bought back family lost to slavery. God became their redeemer, claiming them as his own. Their deliverance was not random. It was the loyal love of family. The price was Egypt's defeat, the plagues, the parting of the sea. God didn't just unlock the cage, he destroyed it. This redemption pointed forward to Jesus, our ultimate redeemer. Jesus became our kin, paying the price with his own life. His arms stretched wide on the cross to buy us back from bondage. God's redemption is personal, powerful, and complete. We are no longer defined by our chains, but by his love. The story of redemption is the story of God's heart for his people. He is our Redeemer, then and now. And the final promise, I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. This is the promise of belonging. No longer property of Pharaoh, the Israelites became God's treasured people. Their new identity was rooted in relationship, not oppression. God's covenant meant protection, purpose, and love. They were chosen, adopted, and given a place in God's family. Their existence as a free people was proof of God's power. This promise is for us too. Through Christ we are welcomed as children of God. Our identity is no longer slave or outcast, but beloved. Belonging to God gives us purpose and security. Freedom is not just escape, it's relationship. In God we find our true home. The Exodus set the pattern for God's deliverance. Again and again God heard his people's cries and acted. At the Red Sea he parted the waters. In the wilderness he sent manna and water from a rock. At Jericho the walls fell at his command. In the time of the judges God raised deliverers for a rebellious people. Against Goliath he sent a shepherd boy. In exile he brought his people home. God's faithfulness is woven through every story. He is not just able to save, he desires to save. The God who delivered Israel delivers us today. Our challenges may look different, but his power is unchanged. The pattern of rescue is a promise for every generation. God's heart is for his people. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Our stories are part of his grand narrative. The God of the Exodus is still writing stories of deliverance. His faithfulness endures. Maybe you're not in Egypt, but you know what it means to be trapped. Your Egypt could be addiction, fear, grief, or shame. You feel the weight, you've cried out, and you wonder if anyone hears. God sees you. He hears you. His promises are for you. He can lift your burden, though the journey may be long. Freedom often comes step by step, but God is committed to your deliverance. Trust his leading. He knows the way out. Through Jesus, your Redeemer, the price is already paid. You are not defined by your struggle, but by the one who fought for you. Your new name is redeemed. God's promise is not just escape, but belonging. He wants you as his own. In him, you find purpose and security. Whatever your Egypt, trust the God of the Exodus. Hold on to his promises, they are your anchor. He is still setting captives free. Your story can end in freedom and belonging as a child of God.